Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. So first of all, I would like to say happy belated Eid Mubarak to all our Muslim brothers and sisters. I trust in true African fashion, you have left us some food from the week's festivities, and we can't wait to indulge. My name is Kundai Chifamba, and I'm a Legatum Fellow. I come from a land famous for economic and currency innovation. The capital is called the Sunshine City. Julius Nyerere and Samora Machel named us the Jewel of Africa. At our independence in 1980, and we're the home to Mosia Tunya, the smoke that thunders. Some trivia for you. Our keynote speaker, Mohammed El Kala, is the Chief Executive Officer of Sira Education, an EGX 30 company and winner of Africa's top IPO in 2018. Sira was founded in 1993, and currently Sira is Egypt's largest investor in the area of private education. It holds more than 17 affiliate companies and brands, including Future Educational Systems, Rising Stars, Mavericks, British Columbia Canadian International School, Badr University in Cairo. Sira is invested in 26 campuses serving more than 4,000 students around Egypt and has plans to expand regionally. Following a 10-year career in the United Nations that focused on development and corporate sustainability, Al-Kala founded Ahead of the Curve, ATC Consultancy, offering technical assistance to the private sector on corporate social responsibilities. In 2011, Ahead of the Curve restructured into a leading regional sustainability management think tank focused around inclusive economies, as Al-Kala believed that the region was in dire need of developing a locally sensitized think tank that works on supporting the realization of a MENA-based model of sustainability. Al-Kala is a specialist in private sector sustainable development, educational and BOP investments, and corporate governance and responsibility. A graduate of American University in Cairo, he majored in political science with a specialization in international law and a minor in developmental studies. He started his career in UNHCR, moving on to UNV, UNRC, and UNDP, where he supported the foundation of the Global Compact Network in Egypt and other countries around the MENA region. Al-Kala is responsible for the creation and management of more than 100 development projects and partnerships involving the private sector, including the setup of Egyptian Responsibility Center for Transparency and the Ministry of Investment. That was a lot, says a lot about him. Valeria, my co-host here, is a leading social entrepreneur with 25 years of experience enabling high-impact alliances for transforming markets that create value across economic and social systems. As a scholar in residence at the Legatum Center for Development and Entrepreneurship at MIT, she focuses on doing research and building the capacity of systems entrepreneurs to transform systems for scale and impact. Valeria has done extensive research on how system changes are shaping and leveraging markets for good in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. She co-authored with Olivia Kesa Scaling Business Solutions to Social Problems, a practical guide for social business and entrepreneurs. Before joining Legatum, Valeria served for 17 years as leadership group member of Ashoka, the largest community of system change entrepreneurs. At Ashoka, Valeria founded Full Economic Citizenship, a global initiative that pioneered hybrid business models in housing small farmer agriculture, nutrition for all, and recycling. These partnerships, combined with successive generations of new programs that have been inspired by this work, are transforming formal and informal economies by improving the lives of families. In 2012, Valeria was recognized for her work on articulating a new vision of capitalism when she received the Harvard McKinsey M Prize for Management Innovation for her pioneering work for enabling hybrid value chains and systems. This work has featured in the New Alliance for Global Change, a Harvard Business Review article co-authored by Valeria and Bill Drayton. So you're probably wondering, why is someone who is building probably Africa's largest educational institution and a resident member at MIT Legatum in front of you today? Education is something that's dear to us and is at the forefront of the development of our continent. And what is unique about what Sira has achieved is that it may not have been at front of mind, but they've built their organization in an innovative manner that anchors on system change, something Valeria is deeply read about and is probably an industry leader on. So we thought it would be best for you to be able to be part of this riveting conversation that I'm very passionate and I'm excited about, and I hope it delivers value for you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Kundai, for that kind introduction. And thank you, Mohammed, for joining us from Cairo. I will be looking it straight. Not that I'm ignoring Mohammed, I'm just making sure that he sees my face. I'm originally from Latin America, and from Chile, and as I prepared for this panel and learned about a CIRA model and the journey of Mohammed as an entrepreneur, I learned a lot, and I got very excited about the relevance of that model for my own region, and how innovations in Africa are ripe to be taken to other regions in the world. And that's what this conversation is going to be about the thinking behind that innovation and learning from Mohammed about the choices that they made. And if we could start, Mohammed, by you sharing a bit of the beginning of the first 10 years of CIRA, particularly in the context of 3 decisions that you would say were key for the kind of company you are today.
First of all, thank you so much for having me, and I really wanted to be there in person. I'm really sorry I couldn't make it. Valeria, I feel humbled being basically discussed by you, with all the experience and everything in place. So I hope I will do a good job to a large extent. Third, I just want to mention, I tend to talk fast. So if you see me talking fast, just slow me down a bit. Okay. So, first of all, CIRA is such an interesting company, and I have to basically tell you, I joined the company back in 2009, and already by then the company had been almost in 17 years of development, still at a much smaller scale, but the foundations were laid much earlier. In general, when I take a look at CIRA now, I see CIRA being a pure social entrepreneurial company even before a term was created to describe it, to a large extent, because the idea was a group of friends and family in 1992, most of them coming from development background, working with entities like USAID, European Development Institution, on different fields, and coming together saying, we want to do something that is entrepreneurial, high impact, and in Egypt during this period of time, it was education, and education for girls. And it was a very important mission, because if you look at Egypt back in the late 80s, if you don't want to go to a government school, and Egypt's ranking on education is very low, the quality of government schools is really bad. You have to go to a private school. And during this time, during the 80s, mainly good education was offered by religious institutions. And that mainly was basically Christian schools or Islamic schools. The idea was, let's offer a school, it's generated by the private sector, secular in nature, while respecting all religions, and at the same time focuses on bringing good middle-class opportunities for girls to learn, that is affordable and not religiously bound. The idea became very popular, and over the course of the years, these schools that started as girls-only school grew into mixed learning and became Egypt's fastest growing network for private education. And hence with the story came decision number 1, which is, if you take a look at the private sector scenery in Egypt and in Africa, mostly education is run by what I call the mom and dad shops. So it's very small institutions since the 70s and the 80s, families who have a legacy school or two, a university, and they focus on it and they basically live off the place. And the biggest decision during this period of time was everybody saying, we're going to lock profitability, we're going to lock everything towards growth, and the company made a decision of, for the next 10 years, all the money is going to be circulated inside the company. And they just opted for growing very fast, which was very different from any similar establishment in Egypt during this period of time. So over the course of 10 years, the cycle grew from 1 school to almost 10, which was very unconventional, and even to the fact that a lot of the existing religious institutions will have 3-4 schools. So the biggest decision at the beginning was, let's delay the fruits of our success and let's opt for growth, because Egypt is a popular country and a populous country. And as you know, Africa is all about the numbers. So they said, we're going to opt for the numbers and delay the fruits of our success, basically. And in 10 years, they became a very well-established network. Second decision that came after that, and during this period of time I actually joined the company, was trying to venture in areas where people have not gone before. If you take a look at Egypt's geography, there's the famous town everybody understands, which is the Cairo, Alexandria. But I mean, when you take a look at Upper Egypt, and in this sense, actually southern part of Egypt, very low level of development, very low level of private sector intervention. And the idea was, let's try to venture into coastal cities. Let's try to embark into Upper Egypt and try to establish a second wave of school with the belief that middle class will stay in their vicinity and not move to the capital if they find decent education and healthcare. And this was a very courageous decision. And even during this period of time, I remember quite well when I came with the idea, no local bank wanted to fund that. And we opted to try to establish relationships with DFIs, Development Financing Institutions. And during this period of time, it was IFC. And for you who is not familiar, IFC is actually an arm of the World Bank that works with funding private sector. We got a loan from IFC and we worked towards establishing 7 referral schools in Egypt. And it was a huge success. In 3 years, we were able to not only fill up the schools, but actually pay off the whole loan, which was tenured for 10 years. And this actually became a very, very successful model of how can you find a gap, get courageous about it, and just fill it quickly. And this comes with it. The second lesson is, if you want to work on social entrepreneurship, you have to understand that 50% of your business venture is not about your Excel sheet. It's about understanding the social weaving around the country you operate in. You have to live with the people. You have to understand what they want, what they need, what is going to contribute to their growth as a population, and try to find every failing of the government and fill the space. And in our continent, I'm sorry, I'm usually a blunt person, there's a lot of that. Governments, to a large extent in Africa, fail to deliver what people want. And there is a lot of gaps around the social and economic needs that needs to be filled by social entrepreneurial ventures. And that was our second decision, which was very successful. And with it came a lot of other ventures that continue going forward, which is when we found the need for university middle class focused, we established Badr. When we found the need for early childhood that actually works on different income levels to allow women to go to the workplace, we established a university. When we felt the need for EdTech, we ventured into EdTech. So it became a standard pole in the country that whenever our team that works on social, we call it social weaving team, finds a social gap that has economic sense, we became a very early ventures into it. And this brought CIRA to be presented locally and in the region as a hub of innovation, rather than just a hub of replication and success. So we innovate, we move in early, we have an eagle bird approach, and we become part of the solution rather than waiting for others to present the solution. And that would make CIRA very differentiated from the beginning. Third decision was actually having our IPO. 2017, we had, I'm sorry if I'm taking too long, stop me if I'm going there.
Please do.
2017, we had a key investor that walked into CIRA in 2013, that was the Abraj Corporation. And Abraj was one of the very fast, for you who don't know it, one of the very fast, basically, PE funds that got established over MENA, based in Dubai. And they became actually the largest in the region. And they have a very famous meltdown that happened in 2018. It's a global story. And basically, Abraj was an investor in CIRA. And during their meltdown, we didn't want to be part of the story. So we wanted to really move forward and jump the ship. So our idea was, do we replace an existing investor with almost 30% of the company with another key investor? Or we venture forward and bring Egypt's first public IPO in the field of education? There have not been a single company in North Africa that have done the same. The only listed companies during this period of time was really Agritech and Kuro based in South Africa. And the model of South Africa was very different from what we have in Egypt to a large extent. So there was no benchmarks to a large extent. And we felt we can bring this forward to the market. We need to, first of all, educate the market about the field of education, reach out to impact-based funds who believe that actually education and profitability can be matched in a good model, and execute this in 3.5 months. And it was such a bold decision. We said we're going to venture forward, we're going to go there. We established a very interesting case study that looked at impact businesses and how education in Egypt can be realized as an impact business given the social gaps. We went on a road trip everywhere from London to New York to Dubai to Cape Town, trying to raise the interest of funds, specifically the impact side of it. And we were very successful to bring in a story that people liked. And the story was, we have a growth plan. If you believe into it, in 5 years, we're going to be 3 times our size. Some believed, some didn't believe. And we really looked at creating what we call it a book of subscription that didn't really rely on a single investor. We just wanted a small amount from a lot of investors. And we ended up with actually a book that held more than 80 investing institutions. Each one of them entered with a small amount. And by the debut of our IPO, the story was very successful. The IPO was very successful. In less than basically a few months, we were almost trading at double the value. And over the period of time, CIRA's size delivered exactly what we promised to investors, not in 5 years, but actually in 3.5 years. And hence, CIRA now is almost close to 4 times its size on the IPO. We rallied our investors to continue growing our mission, and now we're a much different beast and looking now for the next phase. So the third lesson is, if you believe you can do something for your corporate evolution, don't look for benchmarks. Just have a good story, have a right feature, and try to be an early pitcher into the scenery. Africa is very young. Despite how old this content is, business ventures are still very young. We are at the era of creating benchmarks, not imitating benchmarks. And that's why I believe this notion of not only innovation, but courageous execution, working with your local system to try to bring something to the table, have a multiplier effect, because you really get a first driver's seat. And that brings a lot of benefit to the company going forward. So if I meant to summarize and not really bore you with this discussion, is number one, don't jump to profitability. That's the first lesson. Look for growth. That's Africa's biggest game. Second, try to venture where others did not go geographically. Do not settle for towns and fancy locations. The big need in Africa is in unserved towns, and this is where most of the money will be made and most of the success is going to be achieved. Third, do not fear financial restructuring. Do not fear approaching others. Do not fear to bring your story and trying to engage with institutions that are overseas. They're going to help you a lot if you have the right plan, you know exactly what you need from them. So come with your story, bring it forward, be courageous enough to implement it, and it's going to take you to the next step. So I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, definitely you did. And in what you are describing, getting to, a central part of the story of CIRA that allowed that kind of growth and that it positioned you as attractive for all the amazing investors that you have, and eventually the IPO, is the fact that you are not only you not only have built close to 14 schools or more than 30,000 students are part of are receiving your offering of affordable education, but you also created an ecosystem of ventures that are fueling that growth and that have made you the market leader in Egypt.
Yes.
How would you describe that ecosystem beyond the schools and the university, and what is the in many respects the secret sauce of CIRA to get to a point that is the investors are not just buying in the school offering, they are buying in that system?
100%. And it's actually a very good question. And it's another angle we really focused on in CIRA, which is, as you mentioned, we work on affordable education. Matching quality and affordability is a very hard balance to go forward with. Take this idea and match it with the fact that not only in Egypt and most of Africa, we have a huge problem when it comes to supply and value chains. So when you think of a school or a university, it's actually an education delivery institution, but to a large extent, it has massive supply and value chains, everything from construction to maintenance to support to food to services, marketing, bus service, everything you can think of really revolves around an education institution. Problem is, in Egypt, we have a weak supply chain in most of them, and if we ended up going to market, we would be risking quality or cost. So we created a system in which we allowed for basically a lot of small institutions that we can back them up, like smaller contractors, more service providers, bus drivers and others, and we start grouping them up in subsidiary companies under CIRA, giving them fixed income and asking them to deliver the service at cost for the entity itself. So for them, they make actually a steady income that is growing with our growth. So their income is growing. And at the same time, I subsidize the service to the end price mark in CIRA. So the student to a large extent pay a fee that encompasses a lot of high quality services that's centrally kind of subsidized by the economies of scale that comes from CIRA itself. And the growth of the supply chain and value chain over time grew exponentially to the extent that now almost 35% of our workforce work at the supply and the value chain area. And we always try to find if the market at any point of time will provide the services in a way that is more affordable, of better quality, we'll move it forward. But for the time being, we keep what we can under this umbrella, and that's why now you see what we call it CIRA Services Added line, and this includes everything from furniture to construction, to bus services, to F&B, to tech. Think about any domain, we have a sub-company that's working on it, and everybody is subsidizing their profit margin to the mother company to a large extent. And this really provides us the ability to be able to not only provide a good value of money, but also take in or absorb a lot of the devaluation that have been happening. Devaluation is a very known phenomenon in Africa. A lot of people, I'm not seeing the audience, I'm sure most of you who worked in Africa understand that's something that hits you every few years. It's very different from Western economies. And if you don't have a system that's able to a large extent, absorb rising cost margins without really burdening this on the end consumer, you will get out of business very easily in Africa. Because this ability to absorb further devaluation is a key part of sustainability of your business. So it serves the two purposes, what I call it sustainability assurance on the long run, and ability to deliver at the price point we're looking for on the short term.
And when it comes to this integrated system of services that are part of your offering and structure, in the story behind that are the founder, and this is it's a candid question. I mean, did you see the system from the beginning, or was that emerging as new opportunities arise?
It grew with the opportunities, and it grew with the scale, and it grew with every time we basically approached the market to get the service and we failed. So we started creation of this in parallel. So it's not that day one you can set this up, because at the end of the day, if you want to set the structure up, you need to have enough economies of scale to really feed it in. So it was a constant upgrade, a constant addition. I would say over the course of the 20 plus years, we started adding them company by company, and each one made sense. And even in some of them, we vested out. Like, for example, during a period of time, when we were working on issues of barcoding and traceability, because when you have a large volume of students, you need to be able to track records, documents, and everything. We even invested in a sub-company because we couldn't find the service in Egypt. And now when the market grew, we just sold it out. So the idea is not just to keep them in, you can even get them out. So think of it as you're incubating a service provision for as long as the market will be able to pick it up and move forward with it. key decisions, are we able to keep my economies of scale, and are we going to get basically a good return on it or not? And we have this very interesting rule to all of our school principals and university presidents. If the internal institutions is providing you with a service quality you did not like, and you're able to get from the market something that provides you with a better quality at less price, go for it. And that would be a learning example for the internal system. So always have to keep them challenged. And with this, we grew how to do it. We didn't have this idea or strategy at the beginning. I mean, no one here is a strategy with. It's just we're open to learn and keep evolving with it.
And when it comes to the choice of more schools or a university, why did you opt for a university? How does that add value to the schools and the entire system?
I'll tell you something. When we started looking at a university, this actually happened at a time when we started graduating a large number of students. And through our alumni interaction, I remember this back 2010. We had a focus group to see how they're doing after the university, and a number of them who did not go to private university said, well, we don't really like what we got at the public university, and a lot of the private universities are very expensive for us. So why don't you guys think of providing something very similar to what we have learned, because what we have learned in high school is even more updated than what we're learning now in university, and create something in the middle. Actually, it did not generate from us. It generated from our graduating classes. And we said, why not? That's actually interesting. Let's study what's there. So we found basically 3 types of universities in Egypt. Either all public universities, which is strong academically but with very bad student experience, or very high-end universities like the American University in Cairo or the German University, which is extremely expensive for most of the middle class to go into. Or we have some of these small mom and dad universities, which is most likely a building rather than a university campus. So again, we identified what is needed, and we created very nice campuses focused on student interaction, trying to work again on economy of scale, and rolled out our first campus, which is Badr University in Cairo. And we established this with the idea of that we took a town that was totally kind of going down the drain in Egypt. It was not a successful town. We went to the government and said, why don't you create a university there? He said, we're going to go for public auction. We said, we're going to jump on the public auction and take it. And we actually managed to win in the public auction, and they thought we're crazy. Going into this town, which is a failing town, nobody's moving in, building a university. And we were very, very, very basically affiliated with the model of how we see universities build towns around it in the States. So we took the same idea, said we're going to create a good economy of scale, and people are going to move in. And in no time, in 5-6 years, this became one of the most expensive towns on the east side of Cairo. And the model grew very well because middle class were looking for an experience that they can afford and will bring them better education, and hence the same idea moved forward. So with this evolved our notion of not only doing schools but a university, and we started working on a clustered system in which for every 10 to 12 schools in the geography, we complement with the university to absorb graduates and provide opportunities for other schools within the area itself. And hence, we created the first one in Cairo, and then after that we created one to our cluster of schools in Upper Egypt, and now we're working with one for another of our cluster schools in the Delta region. So the idea is we create 4 universities looking at clustered areas that become a hub for servicing 10 to 12 schools. So by the time we reach 50 schools, we would have 4 universities. It's more of a structural way of creating this ecosystem around them. So the choice of, if the cluster is ready, 12 schools are there, we establish the university. If it's not, we wait a bit and we go forward with it.
Mm-hmm. Is there any example of a venture that you would have say no to it? A venture connected to the educational system?
Yes, we said no for years for kindergartens. For years and years, we did not want to venture into kindergartens to a large extent, and it was not interesting for us by any means. But we still kept it going. So we said yes 2020, actually. And why is that? Because we started sensing more and more interest for women in Egypt to go to workplace. Before, to a large extent, women were comfortable in Egypt staying at home, work with the students to a large extent. The percentage of women engagement in workplace was very low. And with the deterioration of the economy, a lot of women felt that they need to go to the workplace. And with it, we started to be part of the solution again. So we created two things. One, we invested in pre-K, because if a woman cannot feel comfortable leaving her kids in a proper nursery, how can she go to a workplace to a large extent? And in Egypt, this became basically a phenomenon we started working with. And again, in 3 years, we have close to 11 or 12 of them now. Very successful. And on the other hand, we created a program for stay-home moms who actually graduated from STEM schools, that we started retraining them to re-enter the work as teachers. And out of this program, we have almost now close to 1,000 basically med doctors, physicians, biology majors who have been engineers have been retrained to work at a school. So they reach an equilibrium position where they don't have to stay long hours, go to the same school with their kids, be able to teach, and come back with them at the same time and get a discount on the education of their kids. So we created the social bundle around it. So again, it's another example where we saw this gap and there's this demand, and we start to fill it with offerings, whether work for people to work, or in terms of finding a place to put their the kids in.
Yeah. And you are building this ecosystem. You are also went through the challenge of an IPO, and to what extent the IPO brought new challenges to you, particularly when it comes to striking the right balance between the demand for profit making and the demand for staying on course with your vision and mission?
That's a tough one. That's a lot of questions in one. But yeah. So I mean, it's such an interesting journey, and I'll tell you what. I mean, in a very blunt terms. I mean, let's think about it. Before the IPO, in terms of me being a CEO and walking into the boardroom or walking into my general assembly, who did I answer to? Family members, close friends, and one strategic investor based in MENA region. So it's always a Mohammed or an Ahmed or a Hassan or I'm being very blunt, Ramona, somebody I either know or we come from the same culture, right? But that comes with limitation as much as it comes with comfort. Few months down the line, I have everyone from Julio to a John, right? And I mean, our investor body ranges from everywhere from South America and up to Asia. So I have investors from Singapore and I have investors from Brazil, and everything in the middle that falls within. And it was such an interesting journey because you don't answer now to 50, 60 people, you answer to almost 8,000 investors, right? Some of them are individuals, some of them are institutional. And you start now bringing basically a lot of what I call it standard performance that everybody can look at and feel that they're comfortable with the level of information they provide. If you don't do that, you're going to end up in an endless Q&A cycle that can take and suck the life out of you. So the idea of moving from comfortable zone to globally exposed zone is all about your readiness and ability to provide information in due time and with enough clarity and vision. So it raises the benchmark of accountability, disclosure, and ability to create a vision that everybody understands and aligns to. That was the major really transformation from pre-IPO to post-IPO. And with these words, although it might sound easy, and I know there's a lot of lip sync around this worldwide, but actually a lot of management transformation happens around that. Because now every line manager needs to report, every report needs to go into a document, this document might be audited at any point of time. So with this comes improved efficiencies, improved management exposure, and improved accountability. And that's the bridge we really moved forward to. Yeah. Second is, also with this journey comes the idea of you yourself as a CEO needs to be credible to the people that invest with your company. I remember I told something to a class at MIT and I want to repeat it again now. At the end of the day, when you walk into the investor's room, get out of the mind that you're walking in with a nice Excel and a flashy presentation. These people will brush all of this aside and tell you, I want to know you. At the end of the day, I'm investing with you. Who's driving this ship? Where are you taking us? What do you want to do? So your sense of credibility, your sense of belief in your idea, and your ability to convince others you can drive them from point A to point B is 60% of your pitch. And that's what you always need to make sure that's present pre and post IPO. People need to believe where you're going before they look at your Excel sheet.
Absolutely.
So these are two key lessons.
Yeah. And now CIRA is poised to expand to other countries in Africa. Are you going to pursue the same strategy than in Egypt, or how would that change? Are you basically going to have to recreate that ecosystem in each new country in Africa?
I mean, the only thing we're really replicating here is the social weaving phenomenon. So we're not rushing in. We're actually studying currently 5 African countries and 3 Middle Eastern countries in detailed forms. So, I mean, we took our time to basically make sure that we create a formula that looks at the social and economic needs of these countries. And we're moving with a very interesting benchmark. For example, we're looking at markets, with a country like Saudi, we're looking at markets in Ghana, in Nigeria, we look at markets in Libya. So we have 3 different pots we're looking at now. What we call them middle income established countries, high income countries, and what we call it, challenged countries. Let's call it pre-failing basically models. And we're trying to create now a model for each that fits each of them. What is interesting for us at CIRA is that when we created the model in Egypt, we created schools and universities that serves everything from $500 to $10,000. So we have the gamut of offering to a large extent. So whether I take this mix and let's say in country Y, where I have high income, I have 70% of the high income and 30% of the middle income, or I go to a country where I have 5% of the high income and 95% of the middle to low income, we have the tools. But currently we're creating the formula that will fit with them. A second thing we're also taking that we're replicating is basically creating a way to engage local resources. We don't believe that much in the transformation of people basically specifically in the field of education overseas. We're going to take a core staff from our team to move there, but we need to create the local model and the local talent. And hence we're working on looking at teacher quality, availability of services, supply and value chains. So at the end of the day, we have something that we call it a decision in 12, and that's that we enter into a country in 12 months, we come up with a detailed presentation on supply and value chain, availability of human resources, gaps and economic opportunities. And then once it's approved by our board, we create a model around it and we pitch for it. So, we're getting very close to probably by next year, launching our first presence overseas, basically by September 25, through this structure going forward. So we're going to see if we're going to succeed or fail, but I have a lot of trust that proper studying and trying to replicate what you can replicate can work very well at the end of the day. Still, there is a lot of variance, but Middle East and Africa, there is a lot of commonalities more than there are differences. That's what we believe in.
One last question before we open it. Could I open it to the audience? And it has to do with partnerships. In reading a case that the Legatum the Legatum Center had, it's about to publish an updated version of CIRA's case. And in reading this, partnerships are at the core of to some extent part of to a large extent part of the secret sauce of CIRA. What type of partnerships and how to build them. Do you foresee that being also the way of going into other African countries? And is there any example that would be helpful to share?
That's actually a key, as you mentioned, a key ingredient of what we do. You know what we do at schools when new students come in? Mm-hmm. We take them around and we introduce them to others. And if we don't do that, then it will take just students a long time to basically be able to feel their skin, get comfortable, and probably might get subjected to issues of basically neglect. And as you know how what happens with students, and it takes them a lot of time to adjust in what we call it, you waste your social engagement over a period of 6 months to 1 year to be able to engage with the team and actually build and grow more. We apply this as here. We are not afraid to knock doors. And knock doors globally, not only looking at our vicinity itself. You're either going to find a local partner to work with, an entity that you can actually absorb into the system, or a funding or an investor that might even open a door for you. So in every African country or Middle Eastern country we're studying in, we access through either an educational company we have known along the years and knock their doors to get to introduce to them and exchange teachers or exchange students, or an investor that's actually based from this country who can open a couple of meetings for us to come in, or a development institutions like the IFC or the Finance Corporation and others that actually works in multi-countries around the world that can introduce us to counterparts. So think of partnerships as a way that enable you to mushroom and grow very quickly. You don't have to think of partnership as something that you need to monetize on day one. It doesn't have to be about the bottom line. Forget it. A partnership will give you a bottom line at a point of time as long as you grow it and enable it to continue. 30% of my time is spent over partnerships. I spend almost half of my time in the US and the other half in Egypt, and my time here is spent over creating of these linkages. Getting to know other universities, getting to know other schools, investors, or traveling out. I mean, we go all around the planet, basically. And every door I knocked, I'm telling you, something good came out of it. Maybe in a few years down the line. But you always have someone to give a call to when you're interested to go somewhere. And the doors get open much faster. It saves you time. It's part of your equity. Mm-hmm. A company's equity is in the level of partnerships and global network it manages to create. You establish the trust, you reach out to people, and this is where a lot of business opportunities are going to come your way. Some will come without you even asking for them. They're just going to remember you at a discussion or a business venture and tell you, why don't we talk to Sierra about this? And this happens a lot to us. So think of it as a build-up to your own capital.
Yes, well put. Thank you, Mohammed. And let's turn to the audience.
Questions? There's one. Lily, up top. Up top here.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, first of all, thank you for coming. It was really, really interesting to hear. I wanted to ask about sustaining a business for so many years, and specifically, I think in a region where political turmoil is apparent. How do you manage to live through? For example, the Arab Spring that happened while you were still existing, and then more let's say turmoil in the region. How does that affect you, and how do you see that in developing business over many years?
Thank you so much for the question. Spot on. I mean, we know what happened in Egypt, right? And a lot of African countries, everything happened. We had almost 5 devaluations since the company was created. I mean, when the company was created, the dollar was for £3. Now it's for 50. So, I mean, they will give you how many devaluations we went through. Political turmoil, a revolution, another uprising, came a few years, another revolution. And then basically all sorts of issues you can think of, terrorism, problems with the neighborhoods. I mean, we have seen everything around Egypt to a large extent. And one of the main things that allowed us to continue with every one of these phases is what I was talking about, the partnerships. Our ability to work with the grassroots. Let me give you 2 examples I always talk to people about when they talk about what happened. When I first had my first devaluation, and I was so stressed out because at the end of the day, I need to double my salaries, and suddenly I can only increase my income with 10%. And during this period of time, because that was the law in Egypt, you cannot increase education fees except by 10%. So what did we do during this example? Because we had very strong links to our parents, and through parents' groups, we had very strong relationships with our staff, and also with the government to a large extent. We managed to leverage a lot of these partnerships and try to bring a case where we were transparent enough saying, guys, we will not survive if we're going to go forward. So we come up with a mixed structure. I'm going to get an exemption from parents to add 6-7%, and for my staff, I'm gonna get you to where you need to be, but just give me 2.5 years instead of 1 year, and that's the plan going forward. And for the government, please allow this to happen without basically penalizing us for going out of the way. And it paid off. We passed. During the Arab Revolution, which was the Arab Spring, when chaos was on the streets, because we created very strong network with our communities, we call our schools community hubs and not schools. Some of the areas in Egypt we were not able to even access because of security issues. They were protected by the community. I didn't have a single PC taken from any school, because in each neighborhood, people made sure that the school is protected. When they created these basically neighborhood watches, I didn't pay anyone anything. And on the other hand, I had a gas station that used to fuel our buses, and during this period of time, the only way to be able to get cash is gas, because people had cash at their home and they paid to put gas in the car. So I used to take the money myself with some of my team members, and we go to our basically workers, we group each one of them in a place, and we just pay them in cash. And these type of relationships help us pass it going forward. Whenever you get hit, you'll have to come back to your core stakeholders. And if you don't have a relationship with them, you're gonna pass this milestone going forward. So I will say, keep a good relationship, because you're gonna need them in a rainy day. And this is how we overcome things in Africa. Because if you think of policy and engagement and long-term solutions, government don't move fast enough as crises do. So it's with these local, basically, relationships, you can move forward and do it. And I learned this from my experience before I joined CIRA. I worked a lot with refugees, and I worked in countries like Guatemala during the crisis time. And I've seen how local populations manage to solve government-related crises without even accessing governments. People tend to provide solutions if they get grouped together under a structure that they trust. And this is exactly what we try to establish in CIRA. You trust us, we're not going to cannibalize in you, we're going to work with you. So when time comes, they're gonna help making you sustain, because you need their service on the long term.
Yeah, agency is definitely key. Agency at every level of the system.
Yes.
We're going to have to call you on your offer of visiting MIT soon, because right now we're going to have to, unfortunately, to stop because the new session is it's about to start. But thank you very much for sharing all this wisdom and your journey. And I hope to learn more about you in the coming months. Thank you very much, Mohammed.